He's editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and a New York Times best-selling author. And on this podcast, he brings deep research, prescient analysis, and world-class guests. He's Alex Marlow, and this is the Alex Marlow Show.
All right, we got a special show for you today. We have Pastor Alan Jackson here, who is world-renowned. I've been going on his TBN show, which is a great network, and just a super thoughtful guy. And I want to do some content that is bringing us more in touch with our Judeo-Christian roots as a society. It's not going to be the focal point of the show. It's not my area of expertise, but sometimes I feel like that can make for even a better interview sometimes as someone who is interested and committed Christian, but not an expert. Sometimes it's great because I have access to some of the deepest thinkers in the world in this topic. Pastor Jackson is absolutely one of those people. So we'll get into it. But first, I'm going to tell you how I'm spending the night tonight. Friday night, I will be on the grill. I've had a super busy week doing research that I will get to share with the audience soon. I've got a speech on Friday afternoon. And when I'm done, I'm going to be firing up the Solaire infrared grill. I'm going to be getting Mrs. Dr. Marlow, whatever side she wants. She's kind of been on a lower cal kick, so it could be just vegetables. Maybe we'll throw a sweet potato in the oven. I don't know. But I will be searing off a steak with that perfect Solaire extra hot, besthotgrill.com fires up to 1,000 degrees in 3 minutes. So I get that perfect sear, that crust on the outside without burning the inside. No gray band. Those of you who know what I'm talking about. No gray band on the steak is the perfect pink inside. And then you get that great sear on the outside. Only with the best hot grill in the market. Besthotgrill.com, high quality, made in America, product, stainless steel, great people. What more can I say? Let's get into it with Pastor Jackson. All right, special episode of the Alex Marlow Show today. We're speaking with Pastor Alan Jackson, who has got an international following. And I've been appearing on his show from time to time over the last few months on TBN, which is a terrific network that Governor Huckabee was on and had an amazing show there before he moved on to be the ambassador to Israel. And Pastor Jackson's got a great political sensibility, but he's a man of God and faith. And there's been so many themes in the show since I started about 6 months ago that really where the secularization of society continues to rear its head. And he's got a new book out now, Angels and Demons and You, which you can get. The best thing to do is just go to Alan Jackson, ALLEN, Jackson.com to get everything about what he does, to see his commentary, to figure out about his show and his many books. But this is the latest one. He's even got an app, which is pretty impressive. But Pastor, it's so good to talk to you. I want to cover a number of topics, but just if there are those in the audience who are unfamiliar with you, can you give us a little bit of your background? Because it's a pretty unbelievable rise you've had.
Yeah, I'm a pastor a church near Nashville, Tennessee, and I've served the same congregation for 40 years. We started with fewer than 30 people, and Easter weekend, we had about more than 35,000 on campus.
My goodness.
We don't do that every weekend, for full disclosure, but so I like to say it's a little country church, but that's probably not a very accurate representation anymore.
What do you think draws someone to a church with that size of a congregation? Because I'm a Catholic and I go to Mass here in Los Angeles, and I don't think I've ever been to a service with more than 1,000 people. Maybe I follow my friend Charlie Kirk around sometimes, and then I've seen him in a couple spots where you get some big numbers, but that's about it. It really is a different vibe I'm sort of unfamiliar with. So what draws people to that size, you think?
Well, Easter weekend's not a great representation because on a typical weekend we'll have 8,000 people. And I think, some of that's just longevity. We've been here, you treat people and families well, and you build something of a reputation. But I also think there's a spiritual hunger. I think people are interested.
Yes.
And I think the Catholic Church is a great example. I used to carry a little weight of like a big church because that's always the first thing people say. But I was standing in line to go in the Vatican Museum. And I started thinking about what that represented. And I thought, we're not a big church. We're negligible in terms of, in fact, on Easter Sunday, Fox Live did a remote from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, the Pope in St. Peter's in Rome, and then they cut to World Outreach here in Middle Tennessee. And I was laughing. I thought, those three make a lot of sense together. But scope and scale of the Catholic Church makes us look insignificant.
Yeah, well, but your congregation in particular, it's very big, and I think people are yearning for this. And I think this is where I want to start, because it feels like we might be on the precipice of a bit of a spiritual revival in the country. It feels like people are yearning for tradition. They're starting to reject some of the secularization of America that we've seen in past decades. I'm wondering if you're experiencing that with your congregation and with the people you're interacting with day to day.
Very much so. There was a marked shift that came on the backside of COVID. There was a real cratering of trust in institutions that I think we had all needed to believe were trustworthy, whether it was the CDC or the FBI, and tragically, some of that was the church, because churches, when they told them to close, they just said, okay. And so people began to look around for places that would tell the truth, observable truth. We were watching things happen, and they were telling us we weren't really seeing that. And that has created a hunger for truth, objective truth, not just subjective truth. And in that, now we have hundreds of people who drive more than an hour one way to church.
Wow.
Or Easter weekend, we had people from 30 states here. And that's not typical. I mean, I've done this a long time, and those are not ordinary responses. So there's a hunger in the hearts of people for a set of values that have been a pretty significant attempt just to sweep aside, I think, in the broader culture. And I pray that they're recapturing that a bit.
It feels as though there was a culture where there's a popularity with atheism and agnosticism in the past couple decades, where people had the impression they could beat evil on their own. You get into this in the book, that's impossible. But can you talk to us about that concept? Because this is one where a lot of people, we're in my neck of the woods, they feel like you can just, quote unquote, be a good person. That's not really what we Christians believe. We believe we need guidance. We need fellowship. We need a set of principles from the Bible. But you speak to me about this.
Well, I think your characterization is accurate. I think the idea exists that if you leave human beings alone, that we will work together for something that's good. And I earned a degree in history, and history would suggest the exact opposite. There's nothing throughout human history that says human beings are going to work together and cooperate for the betterment of all.
Right.
And we ignore the history, and yet they keep asserting that. I'd like to teach the world to sing, and let's all have another Coke.
Yeah.
And the reality is, left to our own devices, we're pretty much selfish. And that's the invitation that as Christians that we hold out to the world, that there's a power available to us to help bring transformation first in our own heart, in our own lives, that will bring us to a place of greater contentment and fulfillment. And then if we make that choice, then in the collective, it certainly is multiplied in a much more significant way. But again, it just fundamental physics or science, if for every action there's an opposite and equal reaction. So if you're going to believe and there's a force for good in God, as I do, then I think it's only logical to believe that there's a devil and that evil exists. And you don't need to have much discernment to look across human history to see expressions of evil. And if evil exists, then I would submit it's in everybody's best interest to have a plan for how to address that, so that we don't spend our lives as imagined as permanent victims, but we can actually overcome evil. That's an invitation that's in the New Testament. We don't have to be overcome by evil, but we can overcome evil with good. And therein is the mission of the contemporary church, as I understand it.
So I want to talk to you about whether or not angels and demons exist. And I want to go in reverse order, though. I want to ask you about, do demons exist? Because this is one where I feel pretty confident that they do. I just, as someone who sits around observing the culture and life full time for a living, I think it's pretty clear that a lot of things are inexplicable without demons. But explain to me your concept of this.
Well, the scripture is my rule of faith and practice, so I'll start there. Jesus believed in demons. A significant part of his public ministry was addressing them. In fact, in the first chapter of Mark's gospel, Jesus is in the synagogue in Capernaum, and there's a demonized man there that disrupts the service. And Jesus casts the demon out of the man, and the man gets to stay in the service. If you scroll forward to the 21st century, if we have someone who disrupts a service, I'm not suggesting every cause of that would be demonic, but I'm pretty certain we would take the person out of the service and leave the demon in the person. And so if we're going to use a biblical model, I don't think there's any questions that Jesus believed that demons, and his disciples in the scripture believe that demons impact human behavior. And the way I imagine that is if you take just about any aspect of our character, the basest part of us, in the New Testament it talks about the works of the flesh. I think you take any of those tendencies we have towards ungodliness, and if we give license to those in our lives, then we can get spiritual support from them. I've taken hundreds of appointments through the years with people that are involved in addictive behaviors, and they say, I know this is destroying my health, or it's destroying my family, or it's destroying my financial life, but I feel powerless to stop. And I think we need an explanation for that other than another therapy session.
Yes.
And I'm not opposed to psychology or psychiatry. I just don't think it's a complete explanation.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was just watching some mindless television with my wife over the weekend. And there were two very lost people who were the subjects of the show. This is the reality TV show. And the least lost of the two lost people just recommended therapy to the other one. And I just thought that is the laziest advice I've ever heard, and you don't know which therapist they're going to or if the therapist knows anything. And I think this person needs to go to church immediately, like right now, right this second. And that's where I would start, but maybe it's too late for this person who's in their 40s, but it is maybe not. You would like to think not. So what is with the just recommendation to everyone that we just go to therapy and that'll solve all of our problems? How do we get here, and is it working for us?
I read a book not long ago that picked up this topic from the standpoint of children and parenting and education, and that we've almost completely removed discipline from in our children's lives, but I think it's true in our broader culture. We're so reluctant to say there's right and wrong.
Yes.
And so if there's no right and wrong, there's no real discipline. So the only response left to us is therapy.
Right.
And I think we're reaping that. And in truth, there is some right and wrong, and we need some discipline in our lives and discipline in our culture. They were not mostly peaceful demonstrations. And if we'll come back to that, where we have the courage to say there's right and wrong, then we can implement some discipline. I think there's a place and a time for therapy, but I don't think it's the ultimate resolution for everything.
Isn't that interesting? Because that's exactly my take, and it's not. That's a very moderate take. That's not an extremist take. That's a very moderate take, which is that, yeah, sure, there's a place for it, but also it would be nice to commune with the Bible every now and again. That might help you in between your therapy sessions, I think. Let's turn to the topic of angels, which appear from the very beginning of the Bible, from Genesis. Talk to me about what are angels? Where do they reveal themselves in our lives?
Well, the presentation we're given in broad strokes, angels are spiritual beings, a created being, and they're created as messengers, but helpers for humanity. God created them to be of assistance to us, and there's a whole host of roles that they're presented as playing. And I think it's why it's such a deficit if we just dismiss it and say, I don't believe in that. It's like we're forfeiting assistance that God has made available to us. The opening premise of Scripture is that God created humanity and gave us authority over the earth. And then the rest of that narrative plays out of how we engage with that assignment. And the angels are a part of the provision that God has made for our lives. He's given us food for our physical bodies and water and the things that we need for our physical selves. And I believe angels are a part of God's provision for the spiritual part of ourselves and the spiritual part of our journey. Post-Enlightenment Western culture has consistently diminished this awareness of the spiritual. And I think we've done it to our detriment. I don't want us to be weird. I still like both sides of the equation to balance. And I'm not trying to jettison my intellect. I've spent a lot of time in school. But I want to live with an awareness that spiritual things are as real as the material world in which I live. That is the introductory premise of Scripture, that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. So spiritual forces gave rise to the material world we live in. And angels are an expression of that. They're instruments of God's judgment. Sometimes they bring judgment. They're instruments of deliverance. Sometimes they bring messages. Sometimes they bring insight and understanding. They provide a whole host of expressions of the compassion and grace and mercy of God to human beings.
How do we recognize when there are spiritual forces that are becoming a part of our lives, influencing our lives?
That's a really good question. In the book of Hebrews, it says that we need to be careful because we will entertain angels and be unaware of it. So I have this notion that they're almost like shapeshifters, that they don't have wings. And John Travolta played the character where you could smell fresh baked cookies when he was an angel, and I wish it were that easy. So I don't know that there's always like a spiritual alarm that goes off. You're in the presence of an angel. I have talked to a number of people who have described experiences for me that they felt like they were interacting with people, but upon some further review, it seemed unlikely. And I've spent a lot of time living in this realm, and I can tell you one from my own experience recently. At the end of every service, I stand at the front of the sanctuary and pray for whoever presents. And usually there's a few dozen people. I mean, I've done that for a long time, so I've had hundreds and thousands of those encounters. A few weeks ago, a man came forward, a little bit of an accent, and he said, "Alan, we need to pray for the people in Ukraine." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "I'm a pastor there." And he gave me his first name. And so we stopped and said a prayer. I mean, there was an urgency in him that was unusual. Now, I've had that conversation hundreds of times with other people, and there's always other pieces around that, and we need help. I mean, we bought cars and food and clothing for people in Ukraine over these last few years. Or there's always some component of that. None of that was present in that conversation. It was just, we need to say that it's important to pray for these people now. So I stopped and prayed with him, and he just left. I didn't see him again. I've never seen him before or since. And there was another dozen or so people in line, so I didn't really think about it in time. But when I got done with that after the fact, I thought, that was an unusual encounter. And it may have been a stranger visiting the church that just wanted me to pray for Ukraine. Or I wouldn't at all be offended to say I had an encounter with an angel that was reminding me. So I can tell you from that day until this, I have prayed on a regular basis for the people in Ukraine. And, I'm happy if God uses President Trump or whomever to bring a resolution to that. But I just want to open my life to the possibility, the probability that there are spiritual forces and influence that engage with us in our day-to-day activity far more frequently than we've been willing to acknowledge.
I love this, and I was looking at this more from a negative perspective in the flip side to this, which is that sometimes if there's something going wrong in your life or you feel like you're making a set of mistakes in a serial fashion, that I feel like we should be open to the idea that maybe there's a demon present and speak to that as well. When do you recognize that perhaps there is some other presence that is there that is guiding you in the wrong direction? And then how do you recuperate from it? What do you do?
Yeah, that's a really good set of questions. There's some general categories that I think will help. From what I know of the character of God is God never manipulates, controls, or dominates. God presents to people invitations. Moses at a burning bush, Jesus recruiting disciples, follow me, I'll make you fishers of men. I mean, that's pretty consistent with the character of God as I know it personally and in interacting with a lot of people. The other side of that equation, evil does exactly the opposite. Evil controls, dominates, manipulates. It squeezes out completely any opportunity for freedom. So if I'm in a place or a circumstance and I see that kind of behavior, I'll start with it's just really broken human character. But if it feels pervasive, and that's usually as much a feeling as it is a logical determination for me, then I think, no, there are spiritual forces involved in this because there's something so oppressive in that, so dehumanizing in that. And a lot of times it's wrapped in some very academic language or some very, it comes in some pretty packages. Evil doesn't announce itself. When the devil shows up, I don't think you smell sulfur and see a pitchfork. Temptation in my life always comes in some pretty interesting packages, or it wouldn't be tempting. But then when I think about the outcome and I'm like forfeiting freedom or liberty or self-determination, then I'm like, no, that's a destructive path. And there's some influence involved with that that's not good. It isn't holy.
Wow.
And I don't want to walk that path. The simplest remedy I know for kind of cultivating your awareness of that is a routine reading of the Bible, just a systematic, like cover to cover, take 10 or 15 minutes a day and read through it because it starts to open your mind and your imagination to the character of God. And he engages with people, and you're not being preached at. You're left to sort it out. You won't understand everything you read, but I don't understand everything I read online.
Wow. So this is skipping ahead in my series of questions, but definitely something I was hoping to touch on. What do you recommend to someone who's never really read the Bible? Well, where would they start? Should they do it in a guided fashion? There's all these podcasts and apps now, or is it just get yourself a Bible and start going through it?
Yes, but if I were going to make a suggestion, I'd probably start with the first 4 books of the New Testament: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They're basically the story of Jesus from his arrival in time until his crucifixion, and it'll introduce you to the central character of the whole narrative. Both Hebrew Bible, Old Testament, and New Testament is really centered in those 4 books. I think if you start with that, and I'd probably read through those 2 or 3 times before I ventured much further than that, because I think you'll get to know kind of the heart and character. And it's a short read. It sounds intimidating, but it is really not. If you spend 20 minutes a day reading, you'll read through those 4 books in 60 days pretty easily. And I think, if you learn by listening, you can listen to them. And there's lots of ways to do that. You can go to our app, and there's a daily reading plan there, and it'll even read it to you. You can listen while you're commuting, or you can go to YouVersion. I mean, that's 5 minutes with Rabbi Google, and you can find a lot of options.
Yeah, at AlanJackson.com, you guys have an app and a Bible reading plan that people can get if they're curious, and they should. I want to talk about. I want to go back to angels and demons, and which is germane to the conversation about your book, and it's something it's somewhat abstract to be thinking of ourselves as corporeal beings, human beings, and we're working alongside of angels and demons. How did God bring this about? Why? And how are we supposed to deal with this sort of broader reality?
All right. Well, again, I think it's, to me, it's observational truth. When I look at the world, it's hard to explain just in terms of politics or sociology or culture. There are some sets of behavior that are so beyond the pale. And then there are some behaviors expressed that is so sacrificial or such a reflection of something so amazing that I think it's not like physical ability. Some of us can jump higher and run faster. These are character-based issues. And so I think to understand the world we're in, there have to be some other forces in play. And the Bible gives us this invitation to that imagination. And so angels and demons is a way of declaring sides or teams, which I understand is offensive to some people. But again, my father was a veterinarian, so I grew up in the basic sciences, and I like that. I like equations that balance, and
sure,
it's just logic to me that if there good exists, evil has to exist as well. And so angels and demons are a way to step into that conversation. What I find is often detrimental when I talk to Christians is they want to go to the extremes. They want to talk about multiple personality disorder or exorcisms. And maybe we've all seen the movie with Linda Blair.
Yeah.
And I don't really think that's helpful. I think the way to begin the conversation is if I equate spiritual health with physical health. Most of us would probably be happy if we could lose 5 pounds. But to lose 5 pounds, I don't need a personal chef and a personal trainer and a personal masseuse and an ice bath every day after I walk to the mailbox. I probably could lose 5 pounds if I would move more and eat less. And I understand that fundamentally. And most people would begin to gain some spiritual health by just cooperating with the simple things that they already know, rather than extrapolating it out to the most extreme cases and then trying to decide whether we believe that or not. And I think if we would come back to that more measured approach, it would be much easier for us then to begin the dialogue and to actually gain some strength.
I just love that so much. And that's exactly the message that that resonates with me, because I talk about, first of all, in the literal sense with your analogy, I talk about this all the time on the show, and how everyone wants to overcomplicate health. I'm not saying health can't be complicated. My wife practices Western medicine. She's dealing with really sophisticated chemistry, but for the most part, moving more and eating less is the solution. And that's just too easy for people. And a lot of people, I think, want the answer to be, you need a lot of therapy, maybe you need an intervention, maybe you need to go for a few weeks to rid yourself of some bad behavior at some ritzy treatment center on the beach in California. No, a lot of the time it's just starting to make small progress towards making the Bible a part of your life, making church on Sunday a part of your life, maybe trying to spend some time doing some good work, some community service in your community. Maybe you start opening your heart to that sort of stuff, and you could go a long way. But we want to skip ahead and go straight to the therapy and the pharmaceuticals. So let me talk to you about that. Why do we how do we get there? And you live a church-based life, and so maybe you don't interact with as many people as I do, but maybe more because of your post as pastor. But for me, I do feel like people blow through maybe a lot of their solutions to their problems are in the Bible.
Well, yes. If we go back to the physical health comparison,
yeah.
The diet industry is $1 billion industry, and there's a new diet out every week, and you can be a carnivore or a vegan, and those are pretty extreme
I eat only
differences.
meat, I eat no meat. Yeah, those are the two. The two best diets.
And we do the same thing with spiritual things. It's like we think to be a person of faith means you don't ever use logic. And I think those extremes are absurd. But because we want the easy solution, if I decide I want to move more, I'm likely, I'm going to go get a gym membership and go spend $400 on new clothes so I look good when I go to the gym, when I could have started walking probably, back and forth in front of my home and made the same outcome. And in spiritual things, I think we tend to do that too. If we would start with simple things like, let's say thank you more often. Let's go 24 hours without criticizing anybody.
I love that.
Let's just start to be appreciative. When, people say, I don't ever pray. Okay, when you pull in your driveway at night before you walk in the house, say, God, I thank you for a home and a family. And just hard stop before you get in trouble.
Wow.
Or when you pull into work in the morning, say, God, I thank you, I have a place to go to work. Just some simple invitations to faith or God into our lives in an intentional way. And what I have discovered in my life and in the lives of a lot of other people is then God begins to meet you. If you take those simple baby steps, you get help. In the same way you get help if you start taking steps towards wicked stuff. Those appetites will grow and blossom. And so put some intentionality behind doing the simple things that make life better. And I'm amazed at how God shows up and then begins to make a difference.
Yeah, and this is, I think, a really relevant thing to discuss for society, because I do feel like the baby steps are they're not. We think about them in our personal lives, but not in our spiritual lives. We think about maybe we should soak our face in an ice bath or rub a banana peel on our face, and then all of a sudden our problems will start getting solved. That's really it's not it. Why don't you start being grateful for your family, your loved ones, and your job, and start there and stop being so critical all the time? So there's a couple of things I think are relevant to just modern society that I want your take on. One of them is the addiction to smartphones that so many of us are going through, particularly younger people, where they're no longer living a life that's based in reality. It seems like it's mostly based in virtual reality. I feel like it's a big curse. I think there's a lot of, you can see demonic presence online pretty much everywhere you turn. How do you recommend families navigate this new world we're in? Because this has just been a huge rewiring of the human brain. It's happened all at once, and we did it with almost no thought to it. What do you recommend for people?
Yeah, that's great. Well, I think probably the simplest solution is limiting. Let's limit our time and access on those devices, particularly for the children and the smaller children especially. They're amazing babysitters, and it's a great temptation. It's like crack for parents. Give your kids a screen.
Yeah.
But it's not great for them. So I think limiting their access to that and engaging them in their world and helping them learn in the world is a first step. But I think to do that, parents and adults have to be willing to limit our exposure into some of those settings. And it's been around long enough. We have some real addictions of our own. Most of us, if you separate us from our phone for half a day, we start to have withdrawal symptoms.
Sure.
And so I just think the exposure is the beginning point. Then I think we're still learning what it means to have access to this much information. I think it's going to make a tremendous shift in education. I spent a lot of my academic life memorizing all sorts of reams of information, so I would have access to it when I want it. And now between Google or AI, I've got access to all this information at my fingertips. I don't think it's so beneficial to spend all those years memorizing Greek verbs anymore. I can get to them a whole lot more quickly. And I think it's going to change education, and that's still an emerging thing. I think for the kids and for all of us, I can sit and look at my phone in the morning and watch the devastation in Gaza or the Ukraine or I've got access. You used to have a Playboy stuck under your bed, and now you've got a portable device, and you can see anything your mind can imagine. And I don't think we've caught up yet with figuring out how to put limits around that and how destructive that can be. And we're living in a culture that tends to say nothing's destructive. You just do what you want to do and feel what you want to feel. And the observable truth about that is it's wreaking havoc. We've got kids that are confused about their biological sex, and that's not confusing at all.
Yes.
I grew up on a farm, and when there's a calf born or a foal born or a kitten or a puppy, the first question is always, what is it? And it's not confusing.
Yeah, that's right.
We've arrived at a place where those fundamentals are confusing, and I think it's really connected to this avalanche of information and images and messaging. It used to be that our family system shaped our worldview, that the life skills of a grandfather were adequate for their grandson or granddaughter to navigate the world in which we live. That idea has completely evaporated. And so we're struggling to figure out how to help the generations that are emerging to find their moorings in the world. And what we're finding is that they're not more robust. And then the parents, I think, have this desire that there not be any pain or discomfort. When in reality, it's learning to overcome those things that happen to us that bring the strength we need to be adults. And so there's this toxic mix, and because we've tried to take our faith out of the culture and diminish it from our schools and certainly from our higher academic institutions, we haven't done a great job of preparing people. We need some values in order to have boundaries to know right and wrong, and that doesn't make us bigots or sexist or misogynist or racist or whatever else is in the list.
This brings up another point that comes up often on my broadcast is it feels like the efforts to undermine things like the distinction between male and female are really about chaos. It's about trying to supplant the order and the calmness of the nuclear family, of a church-based life, a community-based life, with an online-based life where every single norm and every single fact and every single scientific observable truth is questioned at every turn. And it feels like it's designed to undermine everything. But do you have a broader, unified thinking on why the left in particular, as well as the secular among us, are trying so hard to undo every truth that we were taught as young people?
I think it's evil. I mean, my short answer on that, to be honest, and I think the expression of that directed at completely disrupting the nuclear family. I mean, introduces chaos into human beings and then into human civilization, human lives. I mean, that's pretty easily verified. And I really don't think I'm not calling anyone or any institution evil, but I think that is an expression of evil, because if you want to write a plan for people to flourish and thrive, a healthy nuclear family is a cornerstone of that. Mm-hmm. And it feels like there's this disproportionate effort that has been invested now for several decades to diminish that, to restructure that, to relabel that, to reframe that, to re-understand that. And I mean, in my academic career, I'd probably link a lot of it to critical theory, because I first bumped into it in the theology world. But it's infected every part of academia now, from legal theory to social systems. And I think it breeds a whole host of disrespectful things. And we're going to have the courage to come back and say the emperor has no clothes.
Yes.
And we're watching some of that. You know, it's embarrassing to me right now that we have a president, a secular politician, who will stand up for a biblical definition of marriage, and most of the pastors I know won't. Oof. I'm grateful for Trump's courage, but really that message should have been resonating from the pulpits long before it ever got to a political discussion.
Well, why do you think that is? Why do you think that even some of those, because is it a pandering to try to broaden your constituencies and broaden your congregations? Is that the thinking? Well, because for me, I'm drawn to the church when it takes a bold stand for truth and for right and wrong.
Yeah, but you've invested your life and your career in telling the truth. You're a unicorn. There's a couple of answers.
If you're right, I hope you're wrong about that.
There's a couple of components to that. For decades, we've been training ministers that Scripture is not authoritative. That in the same way the current legal attitude towards the Constitution, that's a living, breathing document, it has to be understood against the culture in which you find yourself. That's the attitude that's been given to most professionally trained clergy, that the Bible is a living, breathing document. It's not authoritative, and you have to understand it in terms of the culture in which we live. And so the people leading so many of our congregations haven't submitted to the authority of Scripture, and they won't teach their congregations to do so. So it's very divisive then to step into those places with a sense of right and wrong. I think the other components about that have been really the failure of our higher education. And but you put all that together and it's pretty toxic. What we will do in a religious setting is if we can identify a common enemy, if you belong to a denomination and you're not Catholic, for instance, then it's easy to mobilize everybody to hate the Catholics because there's no Catholics in the room. But if you talk about some moral behavior, you realize the people in front of you are practicing a whole diverse set of things. And if you tell them the truth, you will bring division. So we don't want to bring the division, so we just don't talk about it. But there's a real change in that. I think post-COVID, there is a remarkable change in truth tellers. I think your voice, there's a whole host of people that aren't coming from a primarily religious platform that are advocating for a set of biblical worldview values that are having enormous traction in our culture. You mentioned Charlie Kirk. I mean, Allie B. Stuckey, Brandon Tatum. I mean, there's a long list of people, if I start down it, they're truth tellers like biblical prophets. I mean, that may offend some people, but I think the role they're playing in our culture is very, very similar to those prophetic voices we find throughout, particularly the Hebrew Bible.
Well, it'd be a shame if I take the time to get some of your thoughts for my audience on President Trump. Do you feel like that there was an angel looking out for him when he was shot in the ear but wasn't killed in Pennsylvania? Do you feel like that there has been biblical divine intervention on his behalf?
Yeah, I mean, that one just again is an observable truth. I don't know any way to explain him surviving that event in Pennsylvania apart from divine intervention.
I don't either.
I mean, I've touched my ear 1,000 times and that's really close to dead right there.
Yeah, it's really close.
The instant when you have to turn your head to avoid the catastrophe, I mean, yeah, that seems more than like just random chance to me. But beyond that, I think his willingness to take on that job. I interact with a lot of people that have had resources and options, maybe not very many that are billionaires, but there's 1,000 reasons for him to be doing something else and for him to be willing to take the incoming fire he takes and do the heavy lifting and the hard work. I mean, people say he's an egomaniac, but the people I know that are egomaniacs aren't putting up with the stuff that he's put up with. I think God has used him. You know, he's not our pastor-in-chief. He's our president and commander-in-chief. And to be candid, I think he's led a more moral life in the White House than a lot of people that have occupied it preceding him. So you may pick on his moral choices across the
expand on this
life.
because it was always surreal for me as a Catholic to watch Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi to claim that they're Catholic and then to advocate for every single possible abortion. It was impossible to me. It was so outrageous you almost couldn't wrap your mind around it, and yet the media insisted that was okay. And I just want your perspective.
Well, I think it's the same polarization and hypocrisy that flourishes in politics. I mean, it flourishes enough in the church. I'm not throwing rocks, but
sure.
I mean, when Bill Clinton was involved with the Monica Lewinsky scandal, the messaging was, it's just sex.
Yeah.
You know, nothing to see here. Why are we talking about this? It's just sex. And then when they bring Trump's moral life into question, his sexual choices were all of a sudden, you know, they should eliminate him from consideration for leadership. And I mean, I just think we have enormous hypocrisy in that arena based on our political affiliation. And President Trump has made choices to me that seem good for the citizens of our country. Sovereign borders, fair trade practices so that we're not being ripped off. We're not gutting American manufacturing, robbing jobs, you know, calling some accountability. I mean, what they've done with Doge on spending. You know, I couldn't keep my job for 2 hours if I was as frivolous with money as the people in Washington are.
That's so right.
And I'm a bit concerned that there's not enough outrage around that. I don't want people to be belligerent, angry, or violent, but I want them to look at that and go, this cannot continue. And anybody that had their hand in letting that be a possibility has forfeited their right to lead. Hard stop. I don't care what party they're affiliated with. And it's hard for me to believe you lived in Washington for the last 3 decades and you weren't aware of that great sucking sound that was our tax dollars being siphoned off and sprayed all over the world for all these bizarre projects.
Yes.
So I think I don't know how to describe what's happening other than God's grace and mercy to us. And I have to smile at the unlikely characters he's using because it's like I live in Nashville. It's like some odd band that's been put together.
It really is.
But then I think about me and he recruited me and I'm definitely a cracked pot. So I think God uses unlikely characters to do remarkable things.
It's a wonderful lesson. I want to ask you about one of the patterns on this show, and I've been podcasting almost 6 months, that has come up more frequently than I would have anticipated, is that a lot of men, powerful men, and getting themselves into trouble with sexual sin. And we know there's a thing. I come from the Catholic background, so we're more or less obsessed with it. But it does feel like society has been tailored towards encouraging promiscuity, encouraging people to play the field and to not date for marriage until they're into their 20s or even 30s. I think a lot of women are missing out on having children in general, which I think is good for society. And I think about my life as I move into middle age. One of the greatest blessings that I've had is that I met my spouse when I was 17 years old. And I didn't have to go through what I think a lot of young people have to go through today. And what do you say to families who would like for their children to not have to go through what a lot of people are going through, where there's this arrested development, delays family creation perhaps entirely, and a lot of young men are being told that it's okay to get yourself into trouble in that way and you'll just get out of it eventually. And I just don't, it's just not always true. It's coming up in, Senate confirmations for people to get the most important jobs on earth is, where were you in Pebble Beach, one night in 2018 when you had a couple of cocktails? You want to avoid that stuff if you can. It doesn't make you an evil person, but it's just, we want to encourage people to live a life where they're not getting themselves into unnecessary trouble is the main thing.
Yeah, I think in simple language, I want to ask the question, whatever happened to sin?
Yeah.
And then how did we imagine that there's no consequences for that? I fortunately grew up at a time when we didn't have social media, and that provides some cover. But
sure,
I think we've lost the idea of teaching our kids, again, right and wrong, good and bad. And there's tremendous amount of cultural pressure pushing them in directions of ungodliness. So you have to be willing to be different. But the reality of our culture is, if you choose purity, if you choose to live as a virgin until marriage, you're far more likely to be mocked in the public square.
Right, that's right.
Or in private than you are to be celebrated. We will say you're courageous if you undergo sexual transitioning.
Yes.
But we won't say you're courageous if you choose to lead a morally pure life from a biblical perspective. And we got to bring that back to our homes and our churches, the people we choose to affiliate with. We don't always have choices with how we spend our time, but with your discretionary time, choose people who will reinforce the values you want your kids to have. And then to have the courage to bring a little discipline. It may disrupt your holidays a little bit because your kids will be unhappy. But, what I keep saying to people is, our faith really starts at our kitchen table, and then it extends to our holiday table, and then you can extend it to your friends' network.
Beautiful.
But if you're not going to live it at your kitchen table, it's just a theory. And that's the hardest place in the world to be a Christian, because those people know you the best. They saw you kick the dog across the backyard, and now you're going to say, let's pray.
So good.
You got to deal with that awkward moment where sometimes I make bad choices, and I'm sorry for those. But it's better to have those honest moments of humility and repentance and build a better platform for going forward than just living through wicked, ungodly things and hoping those chickens never come home to roost, because
yes,
life choices have consequences.
It feels like something happened where we all acknowledge we're all sinners. The Catholic Mass starts with the Confiteor, where you acknowledge we sinned this week and say no one gets out of it. We start off with admitting we sinned. But there's a difference between acknowledging that we're sinful and that we accept it and that we're okay with it. And I feel like that's what happened recently in American life, where we went from, well, we know everyone makes mistakes, to those mistakes are okay and they just make us who we are. No, we can reject them and we can acknowledge that we're doing them, but we don't have to treat them as if it's not a virtue. We just acknowledge that it happens, and it doesn't mean you're going straight to hell.
Well, I think even more than that, we made a huge shift where probably the greatest sin you can commit in public is to be perceived as being judgy.
Yes.
God forbid you should judge someone else's behavior. And that's really, it's not a well-hidden attempt just to extend license to everyone for everything. And we're going to have the courage to come back and say that was a stupid decision.
Yeah.
And that there's choices we can make that will make our lives and our homes better. And I think it's going to take some courage to do that, but that is the story of the human condition. That's the story of Scripture. Of groups of people drifting into the weeds and having to course correct and come back. That's the story of the Christian church. It's the story of our civilization. I've been praying for a good bit now that God would bless America again. Because, there's no doubt he's blessed us in the past, and we've drifted off course a bit, and we need a course correction.
That's right.
And I think if we would do that, we would see his blessings, and we'll have another season of, I don't know if it's going to be the golden age of America or not, but that doesn't hurt my feelings. But I promise that won't happen unless there's a moral correction, a spiritual correction that comes with it. Politics will not sustain the change. If we don't have a heart change by the people of our nation, the most hopeful thing about the election in November to me wasn't the outcome. It was that the people in flyover country, just people in middle America, hardworking people that make life happen, made the effort to say, we're going in the wrong direction and we have to do something differently. And that 80 million people that gave expression to that, to me, wasn't, it may have been centered in Mr. Trump, but I really think it was an expression of God's grace, and it gives me hope.
Pastor Alan Jackson, he's on weeknights on TBN, 7 p.m. Eastern. You can also get it on YouTube. I'm on quite a bit, so you see me pop up. And it's a nice show where you get to complete a sentence, which is really nice. On the TV, sometimes you feel like you're on for 25 seconds. He actually lets his guests talk, which is very nice. You've written so many books, you podcast, you've got an app, you've got a Bible reading plan for people. There's so much that you do. What did you want to, this is the last question for today. What did you want to accomplish with Angels and Demons and You? Why did you write it?
I just wanted to plant the seed for consideration in the lives of average people that spiritual forces are influencing your life every day. And that I don't want you to imagine you're a victim, that you can actually make choices that will bring positive spiritual forces to bear and give you the best possible life.
That's beautiful. And that is exactly the message so many of us need. And you don't need some therapist to tell you it. You've got permission today to do it. Pastor, I would love to do this again. I learned so much in this conversation, and I know I will learn more next time we're together. You got a great way of communicating, and you stand for beautiful things. Also, those of you who are purely political in mind, he's got a great political sensibility, as you guys, I think, got a taste of that today in the show. So check out all this stuff. Thanks again, Pastor.
Thank you, Alex. I always enjoyed the talk.
The media is broken. For decades, big cable and legacy media have filtered information to hide the truth. But thanks to podcasts and new media like this show, the truth can break through, providing voices and views the legacy outlets block from the air. But big cable still has one major way to control information, and that's access. They do this by limiting access to something called spectrum, the invisible airwaves that power affordable wireless internet, and by forcing you into their bundles, keeping independent media out of reach. Trump and Republicans in Congress have a chance to do something big here by making more spectrum available and breaking big cable's stranglehold on information. So there's a couple things you could do to find out more. You can go to endthecableopoly.org. That's endthecableopoly.org for more information about how to make more spectrum available. And if you're convinced, you should call your senators and your members of Congress and say, hey, why don't you work with President Trump and try to make more spectrum available? So endthecableopoly.org to find more. To all of you for sticking around for the deep dive interviews, which I enjoy very, very much. And I did, though, want to play some audio that producer Misty had pulled for us, mostly for Thursday's show, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to do a show on Friday itself, and that we were not going to let all this great audio go to waste. So we are going to talk about it with you as a little bonus, a little almost, not quite, this is definitely not a Hawaiian shirt, Friday bonus for you. But let's get into it with Kamala Harris. She gave her first major speech. So she's going to do this stuff because she can't just not campaign and even become California governor probably, and much less be president of the United States in 4 years. So she actually tried to talk about stuff, and we got some audio. Let's see how she did.
Tonight's event happens to coincide with the 100 days after the inauguration. And I'll leave it to others to give a full accounting of what has happened so far.
Does she think that's a joke line? I think she thinks that's a joke line. She's looking good, good hair. Hair looks good. I like the jacket. So she's better styled. So maybe she's getting an upgrade there. Let's see how this goes.
But I will say this. Instead of an administration working to advance America's highest ideals, we are witnessing the wholesale abandonment of those ideals. And what we are also seeing in these last 14 weeks is Americans using their voice and showing their courage.
So far we're a minute in is just platitudes and just saying America is abandoning ideals. She won't mention what those ideals are. And anyone who doesn't agree with Trump is, I guess, courageous just by disagreeing. I wonder if she's thinking of the guy in the Pikachu outfit that we played yesterday, walking around the Capitol, or the guy who was walking with the bike helmet on, who was saying this is what democracy looked like because there was a protest of literally a dozen people. They're all so courageous. They're under deep threat, grave threat by the bad orange man.
We all know President Trump and his administration and their allies are counting on the notion that fear can be contagious. They are counting on the notion that if they make some people afraid, it will have a chilling effect on others. But what they're overlooking, what they have overlooked, is that fear is not the only thing that's contagious. Courage is contagious.
Oh, she's so good. She's got it. Man, she had this little smirk at the end.
Fear is not the only thing that's contagious.
What? Woo! Oh, she believes in joy. She loves it. Everything is horrible. Everything is going bad. Trump is ruining everything. We've lost everything, but also we are having a great time and we are the joyful ones. Who is the person? It's like I'm in a time machine. Sometimes I feel like when I listen to her, because what is she? She's 60. She's almost 60, I think. And she's been around a while. And this was all you didn't need any more than this to become president. Ask Joe Biden. Yeah, she's 60. So you didn't need more than this than to become president of the United States. All you need to do is just say these platitudes. You need to bring any original idea, show any leadership, any specifics. You know, all the specifics we had to do with Jim Jordan about what he's trying to do to actually solve problems yesterday. Even if all of them don't work, he's trying to bring, well, what can we actually do? Like, what are the steps we can literally take? You don't have to do any of that. All you can do is give that smirk. And, ooh, man, we are compelled to do good and to defeat Trump. Great. Okay. All right. Let's see. We got more.
It is not okay to violate court orders. Not okay. It is not okay to detain and disappear American citizens or anyone without due process.
So, again, these are straw man arguments. Which court orders did Trump violate? He is intentionally not violating court orders. He's gone out of his way not to violate court orders. Who has been disappeared without due process? Not a single person. The only person who you could maybe even think of is Abrego Garcia, the Italian from El Salvador, the Maryland Italian man, who was not disappeared. We know exactly where he went. He was flown to El Salvador and he had margaritas with a senator. So, and then we learned about all his criminal past and all these allegations against him. And the thought that all illegal aliens deserve due process is, as I've said many times on the show, and we'll say over and over again until this sticks, it is not possible even if we wanted it, which we don't. We don't want to send a message that if you get here in the United States, that you're allowed to gum up our court system for eternity, which is what it would take to solve all of these things. It would take hundreds of years to give everyone due process. So there's not one single argument that's actually an objection to something Trump is doing.
The courage of judges to uphold the rule of law in the face of those who would jail them. Of universities that are defying unconstitutional demands that threaten the pursuit of truth and academic independence.
He's just reading the teleprompter. She's not. No one will remember any of this. The universities. This is another trap that Trump set that all the Democrats just walked into. That Harvard has got a $53 billion endowment. They are. We're getting $9 billion of government funding, or $8 billion, and Trump's taken away $2 billion of it because they're the most hostile campus in America towards free speech. No one really wants Harvard to get the extra $2 billion. I bet you if you cornered the Harvard faculty and ask them to explain why they need all those billions, why they can't just settle for $6 billion or $5 billion, They would all agree that that's fine. That number's okay. So it's all Trump just tricks them to defending the indefensible. He tricks them into backing 97-3 issues. They're not even 80-20. They're 97-3.
And I have been inspired by the movements like the one in Wisconsin that put Susan Crawford on the Supreme Court, by the State of the People Power Tour that is aiming to ignite a grassroots movement to lift up voices and advance freedom.
You see how
and
uncomfortable it
justice?
is that she just announced that Trump's defying court orders, he's ruining the universities, he's not giving due process, he's disappearing people, but we're having a great time. It's a really tough thing to strike that balance of and you got to have more of a dimmer switch, and she's all toggle switch. Either she's having a blast like she's having right now, she's laughing, she's cooking a chicken, she's getting the finest ingredients, she's hanging out with Doug, who's a sex symbol, and they're just having a great time. You know, he's a roly-poly, but he's also the hottest man in the world. And then it's Trump has ruined everything and the America sucks now. So they've got to figure this out, and this is not it.
And by leaders across the spectrum, including congressional leaders like Cory Booker, Chris Van Hollen, Chris Murphy, Jazzmin Crockett, Maxwell Cross, AOC, and Bernie Sanders. All who, in different ways, have been speaking.
Hold on, she just channeled her inner Tim Walz on that. Let's watch this visual again.
All who, in different ways, have been speaking with moral clarity about this moment.
She is good. She's the best. We want her to run. Like I wish the speech was a little better, just because I want her to run. Hope she runs over and over. I got one more clip of her, and then we got more from her cast of characters. Let's check out Kamala.
In fact, please allow me, friends, to digress for a moment. Okay.
Oh, you're allowed.
It's kind
you're
of
allowed. Let's do it. Let's see what you got.
Who saw that video from a couple of weeks ago? The one of the elephants at the San Diego Zoo during the earthquake?
Uh-huh.
Google it if you've not seen it.
Okay.
So that scene has been on my mind. Everybody's asking me what you've been thinking about these days. Well,
What you talking about? I haven't seen the video. Have you guys seen it? Have you guys seen the video? I mean, I don't know. Should we stop the show so I can watch it? I don't know. I don't think it matters. Yeah, Misty, pull it, and we'll try to layer that in. And in the meantime, you do these things. You know, this actually reminds me of one of the worst speeches I ever gave in college. I haven't bombed a lot, and I probably should bomb more, because sometimes, you know, if you give enough speeches, ask any comedian, you go up on stage enough times, a couple times, it's just not going to work out. The audience is not going to be with you, and you're going to be up there. You got to complete your work. One of the ones I bombed, I remember I got the speech off of the climate change joke, and I was referencing something that I had seen or read. I blocked this out a little bit. It was 20 years ago, but something I had seen or read, and no one had seen or read it. And it fell freaking flat. And I don't think I ever recuperated. And then I had to go, I was up and down in a debate for the next 45 minutes, and it was not good. That's what that felt like. No one had seen what she's talking about. No one knows what she's talking about. The elephants at San Diego Zoo. She's digressing. She can't connect with normal human beings. All right. So Misty's dutifully pulled the elephant video. Elephants, or if you could see on the screen, there's an earthquake, San Diego Zoo. The elephants are moving around, and they make a circle around the young elephants, showing that their animal instincts are smart. And I guess the implication is that we in America need to circle all of our baby elephants by voting for Kamala Harris. I think that's where she was going with that for something. I don't quite follow it. I will tell you, I have the biggest car on the road, and it's gray. And it is, we've named it the Elephant, or Elefante. Sometimes we call it Elefante. So, and then whenever I do a successful parallel park, I always lean over to Mrs. Dr. Marlow and say, did you have any idea that you married a husband who could parallel park? an elephant. I did the math on it. I think the car still technically weighs less than some elephants, which is wild. So, all right. She's incredible. I got a clip of Stephen Miller cooking her and calling for an apology. I think we'll save that. Let's play some of her cast of characters. We get Tim Walz, Weirdo Walz, who said something that was so unbelievable. You've all heard this at this point if you spend any time online, but I just want to share with you because we got to mark this down for history. Here, check out her running mate, Tim Walz.
I knew I was on the ticket, I would argue, because we did a lot of amazing progressive things in Minnesota that improved people's lives. But I also was on the ticket, quite honestly, because I could code talk to white guys watching football, fixing their truck, doing that I could put them at ease. I was the permission structure to say, look, you can do this and vote for this. And you look across those swing states, with the exception of Minnesota, we didn't get enough of the.
Okay, so he is supposed to code speak to white guys. So the thing that I took away from this is that he's a DEI hire. And so Tim Walz, who is, 60-year-old guy, balding, not in great shape, waves his hands in a funny way where he waves to people with two hands with the spirit's fingers. And he was a DEI hire to speak to white guys. So just know the Democrats think that all races and genders and ethnicities, they think we're all stupid. They think we're all just going to fall for demographics, and we would vote for a loser like Tim Walz over someone who actually shared our values. And so just remember that. Any of you who are still on the fence or maybe remember the good old days of the Democrat Party, they are obsessed with race at every turn and obsessed with ethnicity, identity, gender, sex, whatever you want to call it. And I just found that to be worth noting that he was the DEI hire of all DEI hires. I got a little more of this. Let me play this for you.
And I think after the fact, it is not second guessing or anything. I think it's fair to go back on and look at this. Look, we had the most qualified person who'd run for president in this country's history at the top of the ticket. That in itself should have got this thing won. We had, in my opinion, and you can disagree with me, I think history will prove me right, a very unqualified person on the other side. And you have to determine, how do you get those hits? What was the best way? Did it make sense to continue to,
Why do that? Why say it's the most qualified person? Because we all know that's not true. I mean, Thomas Jefferson ran for president. I mean, John Adams ran for president. James Madison ran for president. Even a guy like John McCain, who lost by a lot. I mean, he was a war hero. He was a senator. He had actually written signature legislation. It feels like there are other people who are more qualified. I mean, John McCain was not my choice ever in a primary, but he was clearly more qualified than Barack Obama. Hillary Clinton was more qualified than Kamala Harris. So it's like, why would being a half-term senator makes you the most qualified person? And I just wonder if anyone hears this and it becomes a moment that reveals that he's just full of crap completely. No one in this audience thinks that he's worth anything beyond just a DEI hire to pander to white male boomers, which he was. But I just want to know if anyone hears that and thinks, wait a minute, that's interesting. Kamala gave Jazzmin a shout out, so we were ready for it. Jazzmin Crockett, here she is, guys. We got a clip for you.
And we are in a crisis. And they are pretending that the solution is going to be cutting everything, that those of us that make this country actually go is the solution. Right now, we're cutting jobs as it relates to the federal government. Right now, because of the failed policies around tariffs, we know that we are looking at losing plants. They said that was going to bring plants. They just announced that we had 2 auto dealers that were going to shut down approximately 40,000 jobs. As they then go after NIH, we know that in the state of Alabama, the largest employer in the state of Alabama is the University of Alabama. They are looking at losing jobs because they won't have research dollars. The only thing that they are
Right. So we're funding the universities because the universities are dependent on federal funds, and then they just indoctrinate our kids and they ruin our cities. So I'm not saying the University of Alabama isn't probably better than most other places, but you just can't have unlimited budgets. And if you can justify your budget, you're going to get a lot of it back. We've been seeing that. Is that people get fired by Doge, and then if it's not that bad, they'll hire them back. But it's all government jobs. The government does not create wealth, as Carol Roth explained on the show. The government takes wealth. So you can't argue that the problem is government jobs getting cut. You can argue private sector jobs getting cut. But remember, Trump brought a lot of auto manufacturing back to the United States. Recall, since Trump won the first time, I bought 2 cars from foreign-owned companies that were made here in the United States because of new plants that were built by Trump. A lot of it were built in fear of more tariffs, and that the American market demands certain things, and that other countries find America an appealing place to make certain products. So again, I'm running into a trap of taking Jazzmin serious here, but let's see where she goes.
That they are doing is hurting us. It is the reason, if we're going to talk about numbers and mandates, it is the reason that the only person in recent modern times to have the lowest approval ratings at their 100-day mark is the same person the first time they were in, and now this time. It is.
So, but just remember, Congress's approval is lower and the Democrat Party's approval is lower. And she's become the face of the Democrat Party. She's getting a shout out from Kamala Harris. And just also remember, when she pitches her voice like this, she does not need to do any of the ratchet, self-stylized, ghetto-sounding voice. She can speak normally. She knows how to. There's tape of her speaking normally, that she does all this inflection to pander to other groups of
It's
people.
time for us to get serious and talk about what will grow our economy, what will bring more money in, what will make sure that people can move up from working poor to middle class and maybe even reach.
But now she is rolling on the platitudes, and she says things that everyone would like to see, like more money for the working class and more jobs for the middle class. But she's not saying anything. There's no path to get there. You just modulate your voice in such a way, and that's it. That's how to be a great congresswoman.
This higher level that so many of y'all listen to, this upper echelon, this rich level, because that is what is supposed to set us apart in this country. We are supposed to live in a country where everyone has an opportunity to go from rags to literally riches. And so I am asking my colleagues to start looking out for the people
literally. Literally, I got to work on that. That's the new trend now, is to say literally in some way that I can't do it. I've been practicing and I can't. That's my best effort. I'll embarrass myself, the audience, but that's the thing now. They're doing that, mispronouncing or pronouncing literally in such a way to provide emphasis on every single syllable. All right. She's brilliant and we're lucky to have her. What did I have? I had one other thing I wanted to share with the group. Oh yeah, we got Carville. James Carville now is going up against David Hogg. Remember David Hogg, who only got into a post of the DNC because conservatives were able to astroturf a campaign on his behalf, and now he wants a civil war within the party. Let's see what James Carville has to say about it.
What is your plan to deal with our abominable approval rating?
Win elections.
Yeah, that would be good. Winning elections is where it's pretty good. Carville he's got one of these guys. He's got a Stephen A. Smith type of vibe to him, a Megyn Kelly type of vibe, where whenever they state, Tucker does the same thing, where you state an opinion, if you state it in a clear enough way, then it sounds like you're right, even if you're not necessarily right. And Tucker and Megyn Kelly get a lot more right than Carville, but he's got that great presentation. So he's very fun to agree with. And so we'll do this one more time because it's so short.
What is your plan to deal with our abominable approval rating?
Win elections.
I like that seems like he's on a hotel bed while he's doing this. I look like the Tara Palmieri, whatever she does for her podcast. I think she writes for one of those new outlets. Anyway, was Tara Palmieri show. Okay, we give shout outs here on the Marlow Show. We're not too big for that. Good debate there. What are you going to do? You have to win first. I was talking about this with Joel Pollack. I was talking about how to deal with the lawfare that's going on. And number one step is we need to get more judges on the bench. And how do we get them on the bench? We win elections. So fundamentally, you have to win elections first. That's where everything begins. And if you don't start from that premise, then it doesn't matter. You can feel great about your tweets. You can feel great about the issues you ran on a primary or a speech you gave, but ultimately you got to get people to vote for people. And if Carville's convinced that any civil war orchestrated by David Hogg is not going to lead to new election victory for Democrats. So we'll keep watching it. I don't know who's right, but I know that was a pretty funny clip. All right, we'll close with Trump. Trump talking about something that I think connects the dots from this show today quite a bit, talking about bringing religion back more to public life. As a guy who I don't think was particularly religious throughout most of his life, has clearly found some religion since almost getting shot in the head, getting shot in the head in the ear, as we discussed with Pastor Alan Jackson. So let's have Trump bring us home here.
We all deserve the White House. The White House is special. We're bringing back religion in our country, and we're bringing it back quickly and strongly. Because for America to be a great nation, we must always be one nation under God, a phrase that they would like to get rid of, the radical left. But, Ben, I don't think we're going to let them get rid of that, right?
It's true. They really did. This will be another one that's going to age so poorly. They tried to omit God. They would say one nation, indivisible. They would, as if there can be any sense of America with eliminating God. One of the core American values is in God we trust. It's one of the values that make us unique and special. And just remove that. And the left just tried to do it. They didn't consult anyone. They just started taking it out. We're just not going to say it. One nation, indivisible. We're skipping over the God part. And they tried that for a while. So stupid and bad.
Right? We're not letting them get rid of that. I want to thank a man of incredible faith who's with us, Speaker Mike Johnson, for being here. He's done an incredible job. Thank you, Mike, very much. We're working very hard on a great, big, beautiful bill, and we're trying to come up with a name. And I said, why don't we just call it the Great, Big, Beautiful Bill? That's what everyone, so we're going to probably do that because everyone knows what it means. But later today, I'll be going to the University of Alabama to deliver the keynote commencement address to a record crowd. They have a big crowd. I guess they have 7 ceremonies. And they said, well, if you're doing it, we're putting them all together. I said, that's a lot of people. So we're going to put them all together. It's the first time they've done that. And I'll give it a shot. All right? I hope we can entertain. I will give it a shot.
I can't wait to watch that. We got to do a big breakdown of that, Misty, when that happens, because I love breaking down big speeches and a Trump commencement address. That is cool. That is really awesome. I would love to see that. I wish he was my commencement speaker. We had, I think we had, my commencement speaker, and I think the same thing happened to Mrs. Dr. Marlow. We graduated in back-to-back years at Berkeley. I think both of them got canceled because they wouldn't cross picket lines from some protest that you never remember. So there you go. And then now we've got a lot of the unions backing Trump's tariffs, unions, a lot of the Teamsters, UAW, they like Trump's tariffs. So funny world we're in now. All right, guys, that'll be this week's show. Thanks to all of you in the audience for telling 10,000 friends and family members about the show. If you're on the fence, checking out the advertisers helps us grow and thrive. Our great producer, Misty, and all of you in the Marlow Show audience, thanks for listening and watching.